Now, you'll be pleased to hear that this LINQ challenge is going to be a fairly easy one, and it's about finding the longest book. So we have a list of book objects, and each one has a title and a number of pages. And all we want to know is, what is the title of the longest book? Well, we might think of the max extension method, but using books.max returns the number of pages in the longest book and not the book object itself, so we can't get at its title. So maybe you might think, well, we could do this. We'll look for the first book whose number of pages is equal to the number of pages in the longest book. And this works just fine, but please don't do this. It has a really nasty performance issue in that it's an order n squared algorithm. For each book in the original list, we have to iterate again through the entire list, constantly recalculating the maximum number of pages. And we'll talk more about this sort of thing when we come to look at performance later on in this course. Now, we could improve matters a bit by going through the list just twice. First to find out the number of pages in the longest book, and then iterate through again to find the book that has that number of pages. And this is a much better performing solution. Or another approach you might be thinking of is, well, we could solve this with order by. If we order the books in descending order by number of pages, then the first one is the longest one, and so we can get at its title. And this does feel like a nice solution, and certainly if we were calling this against a database, if books was an entity framework DB context, then the generated SQL would probably be absolutely fine for this solution, as it would be doing something like a select top 1 under the hood. But if we're using LINQ to objects with an in-memory list like we've got here, then it's not really ideal, because sorting a list is quite expensive compared to simply going through it once and picking out the book with the most pages. So there must be a way of doing this properly in LINQ. Can we iterate through the list once and just select the book with the most pages? And it turns out that LINQ does have an extension method that we can use to do that, and it's called aggregate. An aggregate, as I mentioned earlier in this course, is a very general purpose method. It allows you to iterate through any enumerable sequence to calculate a single value. And it has a number of overloads, but we can just use the single parameter one here. And this will take a lambda that's got two parameters, an accumulator or an aggregate value, and then the next value in the list. And so you can update the accumulator with any information that you need to pass on to the next stage. So the accumulator here simply contains the longest book we've found so far. And with this overload of aggregate, the starting value of the accumulator is simply the first item in the list. And if any subsequent book we come across is longer, then we can return that one instead. So great, we've solved our problem, we're only iterating through once, and we're returning the book with the most pages so we can get at its title. But I have to say that code that uses the aggregate method, I think, is not always particularly readable, and this is quite a trivial example. Remember, what we're after is code that captures our intent. And what are we trying to achieve in this call to aggregate? Well, we're trying to find the book with the maximum number of pages. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a max by method in LINQ, where we could pass in the same lambda expression that we originally tried passing to max, but instead of it returning the maximum number of pages, it returned the book with the maximum number of pages. So something like this. Well, sadly, there is no such extension method in LINQ, but that doesn't stop us creating our own. And as we're going to see in the next module, with this particular example, someone else has already done the hard work for us, and there's a NuGet package we can easily install to get at it. So that's where we're going next module, but before we get onto that, let's wrap up what we've learnt in this module.